In the current world, which is filled with so much violence, so much waste, so many threats, how can you look at that and find within it beauty? My name is Robert Adams. I'm an 85-year-old American photographer. Beauty is an antique word and much in disrepute among many, but I think it's central. Beauty to me is a word for wholeness.
Hi there. Beauty is perhaps not the first word that comes to mind when you think of the photographs by Robert Adams on urban expansion. His work came to prominence in the mid-1970s through his book The New West. And also he was included in the famous exhibition New Topographics, Photographs of a Man-Altered Landscape. Before Ecologists became trendy, Robert Adams was driven to reveal how the presence of humans was affecting the landscape of the American West. When you look at these early pictures, one's first reaction is to recoil from the mindless urban developments. And then one becomes really protective of nature. But even these images have an engaging aesthetic that results from Adams' awareness of composition and light. Adams said that the subject of these pictures is not the tract homes or freeways, but light itself, which he feels is the source of all form. In the same way that a war photographer composes captivating images of destruction using light and form, Adams seeks out beauty within these disrupted spaces. He manages to create a serenity in his images by avoiding becoming a crusader. He says that all land, no matter what has happened to it, has over it a grace and an absolute persistent beauty. So he's looking at the geography as a whole, and that includes both the natural and the man-made. Later in life, he started more to seek out traces of nature in the spaces untouched by urban expansion, and also those spaces in which nature has made a stand. He sees these photographs as indicative of hope. The images that you see in this book called Gone are more informal and lyrical, as if he's just taking a leisurely stroll along the edges of the Rocky Mountains. It's more of a prayer to nature and how he feels being connected with it. These sun-flared shots make one aware of how it feels when the sun pops through the clouds or the foliage and brings warmth to one's skin. The book is reminding us of the glory of nature and that life is precious and fragile. Robert Adams is a soft-spoken, understated man who radiates a quiet intelligence and an earthy spirituality. He grew up in Colorado and received his PhD in English from the University of Southern California.
The American West has been my primary subject, particularly the landscape. When I went away to school in California, I encountered a landscape that seemed to be coming apart, basically. It was not respected and had been damaged. I thought this must be the worst place in the whole world. And slowly I came to love it too.
He moved to Colorado to start a career in teaching, but he was shocked by the deterioration of that landscape. He needed to find a way to express what he was seeing and feeling and turned to photography.
And then I went back to Colorado, and it seemed like the California condition was rapidly moving eastward. And it just hurt terribly.
This next clip, I think, is extremely revealing about his development as a photographer, and how sometimes one just has to do the work, trusting and allowing the process to unfold. By persevering with a level of uncertainty, he discovered a form of expression which perfectly matched his surroundings, his personality, and his feelings towards the subject.
When I began to photograph, my first efforts were very much in the mode of Ansel Adams. But a very odd thing happened. I went out and I took pictures of interstates and new housing, which was growing all along the edge of the mountains in Colorado. And I began to get pictures I didn't really understand. There was the bad stuff, but every once in a while there was still a kind of luminous radiance over this landscape of mistakes, really. And I began to see this was a very complicated issue, and that got really interesting. You could take pictures of suburban tract homes, which are in many ways inhumane, but they were showered with high-altitude sunlight that transformed them in ways that I can't put into words, but it sort of saved them in a way.
He said that one needs to go to the landscape that frightens one the most and take pictures until you're not scared anymore. In order to come to terms with the developed spaces that surrounded him, he needed to photograph the devastation.
The artist intuits something beneath and within what appears to be frightening, and how that is done and how it's conveyed, of course, is one of the great mysteries that surrounds art.
He began to teach part-time in order to spend more time photographing. In this image, he's sending us a message. Frontier is missing its final R. The letter has disappeared in the same way that the landscape itself has been lost to overdevelopment. He infuses his images with a stillness, that sense of peace and awe that only nature can inspire. His tools for achieving this are his fairly classical framing approach as well as light.
Light it is a physical thing that you're working with. It's also obviously metaphor. It's what you're working with to arrive at metaphors. It's the age-old symbol for truth. It's or expression of truth. So yeah, it's a loaded thing, but fundamentally though, it's just a deeply mysterious, compelling ingredient for your understanding of life and your response to it. It's at the center of why one makes pictures and how one makes them. So as a photographer, what I'm after usually is a picture where all the pieces fit together into a unified, balanced, coherent whole. But above all, a photographer has the edges of the frame. And what you do is try to look at the world in a way through the finder so that all the pieces cohere. In most cases where I'm photographing it, a wholeness in the picture is a metaphor for wholeness in life.
His images have a power because they capture a silent moment within the flow of time. We as viewers catch a glimpse of his search for peace within the restless human busyness. His photographs of trees are more like portraits than they are landscapes. He isn't trying to instill human qualities into them. They are more like markers that inform us of life as seen from the perspective of the trees. These trees remain rooted in one place while we humans run around doing a million different things. In this series, Adams photographed a single tree over a period of time so that we see the human influence on the landscape through the eyes of the tree, which is experiencing time on a different scale. The land is cleared and structures are built while the tree isn't changing very much at all. In this shot, the tree is announcing its survival. This land could have been covered in trees before the houses were built, but the shadow on the garage door becomes a statement about the tree's endurance. Nature's resilience is a strong theme within his work. Here he talks about another tree image and at the same time illustrates why trying to explain a photograph is often futile.
I'm fond of a remark that Robert Frost made when he was asked what a particular poem meant, and he thought for a minute. He said, "You want me to say it worse?" All I can say is that it's a picture that does capture both the resilience of nature and the isolation of nature, often in Los Angeles. It's got the full burden of mystery and damage.
The 19th century photographer Timothy O'Sullivan had a strong influence on Adams's work. He portrayed the mountains and valleys of the West, but he didn't ignore human encroachment. You can see why Adams related to his work. He was also acutely aware of human foolishness and frailty. Some of his most famous photographs documented the American Civil War. Adams, in turn, has influenced many younger photographers. Alex Soth described Adams' book Summer Nights Walking as a gateway drug and said that it lit a spark within him for a kind of romantic solitude. Adams has recently become concerned by the direction that the art world has taken. He compares the museum, gallery, academy complex to the military-industrial complex and is saddened by its rejection of beauty. His work is filled with loneliness, sadness, and despair, but it's also filled with hope, resilience, and beauty. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.
As all photographers know, one good picture next to another good picture, and you have a third something. It may be better, it may be worse. But putting pictures next to each other it inevitably influences the nature of both pictures. So when you go about making a book, you're spending time finding those relationships. First of all, you're sorting down to get absolutely the best individual pictures you can. And my rule in doing books is every picture has to work by itself first. But if they work together, sometimes it's worth making them accommodate each other.